Hello, Flame community. This is Jeff Kyle with the Flame Learning Channel. The Flame 2027 release introduces a reimagined metadata system, giving us incredible pipeline flexibility for metadata management. In this first video, we'll be covering the basic interface and going over where to find the new metadata features. We can find the new and improved metadata submenu in the pre-processing area of a clip in the timeline, when selecting a clip inside of batch or batch effects, or with the new metadata timeline effects. Here in batch, when I click on this clip here in the schematic, we have a new metadata submenu at the bottom. We can add metadata to any clip regardless of the file format, but as of this release, Flame can only read metadata from RAW or OpenEXR clips. Here in my example, we see a list of all the metadata contained in the clip in this 3-column table broken down by key, output value, and status. On the left, this Add button allows us to manually add metadata to the clip with options to adjust the key name and the key value. We can edit the selected key either with this Edit button, which opens up the metadata key dialog window, or by clicking on the field directly in the table. When we're looking at a clip in batch or using the metadata node, we have access to this list of tokens, which applies to the key value. If we've added tokens that might have changed since we set the metadata value, we have this Update Tokens button to refresh the tokens used in all of the metadata keys for the selected clip or node. The table's various columns are sortable for easy navigation, and if I scrub the time bar, we can see that for keys that support per-frame metadata, those are updated appropriately. Note that if we modify any per-frame metadata value, then that adjusted value is no longer linked to the per-frame metadata key. When we adjust a key's value, the status column indicates that it's been edited, so we can keep track of what's being read from the file and what's been adjusted. To reset any changes we've made, we have the Reset button with this drop-down on the bottom right to reset either the selected key or the whole table of metadata with any changes we've made. Any value that isn't able to be modified will be marked as read-only. This Output drop-down on the left allows us to discard keys, either all of them or a selection of keys, since we can multi-select any number of lines, and if we've already discarded some keys, we can restore them with this drop-down as well. Alternatively, we can double-click the status column to discard a key, or if it's already been discarded, double-clicking it restores it. In this context, discarding means that key is not passed through the metadata pipeline. In this example here, if I discard all of my keys except for this one, and then do some compositing, if I look at the write file node, I can see that the key that wasn't discarded is the only one that would make its way into the render if I exported this as an EXR sequence. Conversely, since this process is non-destructive, if I restore all of the keys upstream and check the write file node, now all of the keys are being passed through, and if I render this out, all of the metadata will flow through the EXR output. If we find ourselves frequently discarding the same metadata, adding a preset looks at the keys and saves the current state of the discarded keys, so the next time that preset is applied, the same keys are discarded. On the right, we have a number of ways of filtering down the metadata table to show any number of different filters, as well as a custom string if we want to do a targeted search for a specific metadata key, value, or keys and values together. When it comes to embedding metadata into our renders, as we saw a moment ago, we have a metadata submenu here in the render or write file node to preview what's about to be output, but Flame can only write metadata into the EXR file format. So if you're planning to use metadata in your outputs, you'll need to be sure to output an EXR file sequence. Another important change to note here in batch is that the way basic metadata works has changed just a bit. In this context, basic metadata refers to timecode, shot name, and tape name. In legacy versions of Flame, basic metadata populated into a render or write file node during a sequence publish, or when the node is pulled out from the bin, and we perform a T-click on a clip with existing basic metadata. Now, because of how metadata is sent throughout the schematic, basic metadata like timecode, shot name, and tape name are passed through just like any other metadata. Depending on some rather specific circumstances, this might not be what you want. So we do have the ability to control how basic metadata works for our render or write file nodes here in the Node Prefs tab under this basic metadata section, choosing to either use the input values, set custom values, which is the legacy behavior, or to populate the basic metadata from either the front input or the metadata input. But we'll cover this in a bit more detail in the next video. Modifying metadata on a source level via the Preprocessing tab respects the connected conform workflow, meaning that if a source is used in multiple places within a real group, the edited metadata will propagate to every other instance of the source throughout the real group once it's modified. This also means that once it's modified, when that media is exported either via the regular export menu or via a sequence publish, the modified metadata is included in the export so long as the export is an EXR sequence. In batch and batch effects, it's important to note that metadata modifications take place on the clip rather than the source. Source metadata can be accessed by switching to the timeline and accessing the preprocessing there, but the metadata submenu shown in batch is on the clip level, meaning that any changes made only affect the singular clip inside of batch and aren't connected to any other clips throughout batch or throughout the real group. Flame also has a metadata node in batch, which opens up some other powerful workflows like comparing the metadata of two clips and injecting or replacing keys, but we'll cover that in a bit more detail in the next video. Here in the timeline, we mentioned that we can access the metadata of the clip via the Preprocessing tab over here in this metadata submenu, but we can also apply this new metadata node as a timeline effects. Accessing the metadata this way creates a buffer between the timeline effects modifications and the source metadata modifications, both allowing us to easily turn off any modifications we make and also send any adjustments we make onto other clips by dragging and dropping them onto other segments. Another way to view a clip's metadata is through burn-in metadata or the metadata overlay. When we either access the metadata overlay with this dropdown or use burn-in metadata timeline effects and add metadata here, we now have access to this input metadata keys option, and since I'm working with an ARRI RAW MXF, the list populates with my metadata, and you'll notice by default everything comes in hidden. The intent here is that we would unhide just the metadata we want to see, since we probably wouldn't ever want to include all metadata on the clip in a burn-in. So as an example, I can enable just these fields by double-clicking the hidden field, and then they're visible in my burn-in metadata. We can't directly modify the name of the key, but for those longer keys that have periods or slashes in their name, if we head over to Setup and Display, we do have the ability to remove various levels of words with this custom level option. Metadata is searchable in Timeline Search over here in this Metadata Keys section, where we can select any number of segments on the current track or all tracks that match the criteria we set here. And finally, an important metadata note when it comes to archiving. Cached media does not retain metadata when restored from an archive. The metadata lives with the source media files, not the cache, so if preserving metadata is a must, be sure to use media export or sequence publish with EXRs, of course. And that wraps up our overview of the new metadata improvements. In the next video, we'll be diving into some of the more advanced metadata workflows. If you like these videos and you're finding them helpful, please subscribe to the Flame Learning channel and click the bell to stay notified about new content. Feel free to comment any questions or suggestions below. Until next time, thanks a bunch for watching.